Let's move on, though, now to the 40-21 section here. Starting off with Braden Fisk, guy who I think exploded up draft boards after the Senior Bowl. I think only other guy, probably the only guy that benefited more from the Senior Bowl was maybe Jackson Powers Johnson. I think Braden Fisk, I think it's really worked his way up here coming from Florida State. What are some of the things that you like about Braden Fisk?
Explosive. He is so explosive at his size. He can play against the run really well. I think of kind of the pass rushing defensive tackles here, he is the best against the run. And he's not going to be Byron Murphy or a Jerson Newton against the run, but he can definitely hold his own in one-on-one matchups. And I think somebody is going to get a gem here in Braden Fisk. The biggest thing, his biggest knock is just he doesn't quite have the arm length that you want. Like if you watch him and Byron Murphy go through that drill at the combine where they're slapping the dummies over, you can just see how long and clubbing Byron Murphy's arms are compared to Braden Fisk's. And it's just if he's able to overcome that, he's going to be in the league for the next 10, 12 years and be a force to be reckoned with.
Yeah. So. Yeah. No, it's especially in two, and we're seeing this now with Christian Wilkins going to the Las Vegas Raiders. And if you can go get a big defensive tackle that can just terrorize the defensive interior, it's going to take a bunch of pressure off of the edge rushers. And then if you compare him up then with already a dominant edge rusher, it's that defensive line is going to be tough to beat on any given Sunday. So let's move on now to a couple of corners here. Mike Sandstrill from Michigan and also TJ Tampa from Iowa State. Both these guys, I think, are very unique and I think just solid cornerbacks. I think just overall solid. They're not going to do anything greater than those top 5 corners, I would say, that we're going to get to here in a second. But they're just going to be consistent here. I think they could potentially go in at the back end of the first round. It's just going to depend on where they're at on some of these teams' boards. But I think in general, though, I think you kind of put them in that Kamari Lassiter and then also that who's
Enos Rakestraw.
Enos Rakestraw range.
Yeah. And starting off with Sanders I think he's going to make his money being very versatile. He can kind of play inside, play outside. I will say at the NFL, he probably will become a safety. Just he has a really good vision for zone. And it reminds me a lot of Dax Hill from Michigan a few years ago. He just kind of played a little bit of everywhere. And that to me is where Sanders will make his money. And Tampa, he's going to be 6'2", 200. So he's going to be that outside corner. But if that doesn't work out, I think he would make a great kind of strong safety, put on a few LBs and make him a strong safety. Because, again, he also has a good feel for the game and a good view of zone coverages. And he can hit, man. Like watching him for a corner, he is not shy to go stick his shoulder into some running backs or wide receivers coming across the field. So I like both of these guys. They both do really well in multiple different schemes. I will say Tampa maybe a little bit more man, Sanders still maybe a little bit more zone. So just kind of whatever your flavor is there. Next up is a guy that I feel like has been flying up draft boards, Peyton Wilson, the linebacker from NC State. I mean, he's 6'4", 238, ran a 4.4, and like comes downhill really well. He's exceptional in coverage. Not a whole lot more you really want from a linebacker.
Yeah. Well, he's kind of that perfect size, I think, of what I was saying earlier about some of these other linebackers who are just a little bit – they're like the traditional type linebacker, maybe like a little bit beefier, so to say. But with his overall size and then with his speed to come along with it, in today's NFL, there's a lot of 11 personnel, so there's going to be three wide receivers out there, a tight end. Most of the time, that tight end can go out and catch the ball, and then a speedy running back in the backfield. So you're going to have more secondary in the backfield than linebackers, like a traditional 4-3, for example. A lot of teams are going to be doing nickel. So you need to have that linebacker who can run sideline to sideline as quick as possible, just as quick as some of these running backs.
Yeah.
And so that's why I think he's flying up these boards, because guys like that are invaluable.
Yeah.
It's so I think he can sneak into the first round. I'm looking at a team like Dallas, for example, who is taking a couple of hits from guys leaving to follow Dan Quinn to Washington. I think they need a little bit of help on the linebacker, not a little bit. I would say some decent help on the linebacker position. So I think a guy like Peyton Wilson, I think would fit in perfectly. I think to that setup. Then you pair him too on the opposite side of Micah Parsons if you want to have a blitz. Those are just two fast guys that are going to be coming at the quarterback from different angles. So it's going to be interesting to see where he ends up falling, just with kind of how linebackers are viewed. Lastly, on this slide, though, Michael Penix. He is, like, who knows where these second three quarterbacks are going to go. Most likely, the top three quarterbacks, Williams, May, Daniels, are probably going to go 1, 2, 3. At minimum, they're going to be taken in the top 10. Who knows, though, where Penix, Bo Nix, and then JJ McCarthy are going to end up falling. Penix here at 36, I think what helped him, at least in my eyes, was his clean bill of health. I think he, the getting medically cleared, he looked the most poised, I would say, during the combine. It makes sense. He's one of the older guys that is out there. He's had a lot of experience. So I as an IU fan, would love to see him do well. And so I'm curious to see where he's going to be. He could end up sneaking into the end of the first round here, maybe even earlier on, depending on what happens with this kind of quarterback carousel that's happening.
Yeah, I mean, these second three quarterbacks, JJ McCarthy, I guess, has kind of pushed his way up by around the top 10.
Yeah.
But Nix and Penix, the reason why I have Penix this low is just because of his injury history. And I will say, of all the quarterbacks, I feel like he reads the middle of the field probably the worst, just in the sense of he has a lot of arm strength. In terms of arm talent, he has that fastball. He struggles to throw with touch. So getting the ball over linebackers, he kind of struggles with for that like intermediate passing.
Yeah.
And then also Washington, this is credit to them, but they did a really good job of making his reads very simple. They ran that spread offense. It's kind of hard to disguise stuff against a spread offense, because if you disguise things too much, then you're just out of position. And you got guys running open all over the field. So he, to me, has the hardest translation of anybody to the NFL. But I definitely think he has the skill sets and the mentality to go in and be successful. So I really like him, and I think teams are going to be really happy with him here at the beginning of the second round, most likely. So let's get into 35 through 31 here. Starting off, Kool-Aid McKinstry. We talked a little bit earlier about his positional flexibility here. I do think he probably is best in a zone scheme. He can play man coverage, and he can play man coverage at a high level. But I think when you really see him thrive is when he's able to drop off into a zone and just kind of read what's going on in the play, and then drive on the ball or a receiver from there. And just a really talented guy, one of the highest rated Alabama corners ever. I saw a thing the other day, and it was like he's the fourth highest rated Alabama corner ever. The other ones were Marlon Humphrey, not Marshawn Lattimore. Oh crap, I forget. But it was three like perennial Pro Bowl corners from Alabama.
Yeah. And Terry Arnold. And so, he's solid. I think one thing that fell him down a little bit on our board, wasn't able to test at the combine.
Yeah.
And there's also just some other players that have just worked their way up here. Like, for example, we'll get to them here in a second, but like Kingsley Suamatea and Zach Frazier as well. So I could definitely still see Kool-Aid McKinstry being a first round corner. I think he's probably slipping a little bit. I do believe he's going to go in front of that Mike Sandstorm, TJ Tampa, Enos Rakestraw group. But I think he's at the bottom end of that first tier level of corners. And so, moving on though to Amarius Mims. We went back and forth on this because I guess Amarius Mims is just a freak human being. He is so huge and so athletic. But then at the same time, though, too, there is a concern just overall on just his overall experience. He's only had 8 starts as well. But you just go look at it on paper, he looks like a future Hall of Famer left tackle for any team.
Yeah, and so similar to Troy Franklin, I'm not really as high on Amarius Mims. He's very raw technically. Broderick Jones, we would joke, I really liked Broderick Jones last year, and I was like, he's just a raw Trent Williams, like with his athleticism. And Amarius Mims is not even close to as developed as Broderick Jones was. And I think you couple that, Amarius Mims has some significant injury history in the sense of he has been active and technically a starter on Georgia's roster for the last 2 seasons, but he's only played 8 games because he can't really stay healthy. And then he actually even got hurt at the combine. So just a few like areas of concern there for me. And there's just other tackles that I kind of prefer over him. Speaking of tackles that I like a lot, a little bit more than Amarius Mims, Kingsley Suamatea, played both tackle spots. He's a great athlete, not as freakishly big as Amarius Mims, but still freaking huge, like 6'6", 325, I believe. He moves really, really well, and just all the talent in the world to be a Pro Bowl caliber tackle at the next level.
Yeah. And so it's one we're just starting now to get into some of those guys whose size, like they're just freak human beings. You know, and so if you're looking for a right tackle, a lot of these guys, I think you can maybe not plug and play, but if you look at the overall projection and their ceiling, it's absolutely, I think, worth the risk here taking it in a late first round, early second round. So, yeah, like Zach Frazier here, he's been working his way up, very similar to Jackson Powers Johnson, but I think one of the top linemen in the class overall. But I think getting here at a center, I'm looking at a team potentially if. Well, I was just said Ravens, but they have Tyler Linderbaum. But the Panthers traded Brian Burns, so they now have the 33rd and 39th overall pick. If they're wanting to reset on the center line or on anywhere in the interior offensive line, I think Zach Frazier would be a perfect pick at one of those two spots here.
They did also go out and get Rob Hunt today. So
no. And it doesn't say depending on how the free agency works out. I'm just talking about Zach Frazier is that talent as well. We have him higher up here. This is one of the few times where I think potentially we have him at 32nd, which is the last pick of the first round. I could see him falling to maybe like in the 40s just because of overall positional need.
Positional value.
Teams. Yeah. So another guy I could see falling here, but also I could see being taken well earlier than 31st overall is Bo Nix. Similar to Michael Penix, who knows where he's going to fall here. I think with the quarterback carousel that we'll see over kind of this free agency period over these next couple of months, that I think going to really determine on where teams see Bo Nix and Michael Penix. If a team is desperate for a quarterback, they'll probably take a shot on him or JJ McCarthy or Michael Penix. So I think with Bo Nix, I think we kind of know what we're going to get. He's obviously going to improve when he comes to the team, but it's not even like Michael Penix or with JJ McCarthy, where there is still some sort of mystery, like how is he going to translate over to the NFL, especially like JJ McCarthy. I think he's a big mystery. Bo Nix, we've seen so much of him, and we know he can be consistent, but that Oregon offense, I think it kind of reminded me of the Broncos offense with Russell Wilson. So that's why I almost wonder maybe Bo Nix kind of might go in there. A lot of dink and dunk, or it was a deep ball. So I curious to kind of see how he overall develops and who ends up taking him here. I mean, I could honestly see Denver taking him at 12. I think he would fit in well with what they're trying to do. But what is Denver trying to do? What's the direction of Denver? So
I think they're rebuilding. That's the direction.
Trading off Jerry Jeudy, I would say so.
The thing I like about Bo Nix is I feel like he's always making the right decision. And I don't know what he's being coached. I don't really know this, like the scheme of Oregon. He just protects the football really well. He's quick. He gets the ball out of his hands quickly. He's a plus athlete. I think he has plus arm strength that he showed off at the combine. He makes great decisions. And people always make fun of him because he's the check down king. I'm like, well, one, that's not always a bad thing. And two, like Oregon's offense is very much around the line of scrimmage or down the field. And he showed when they throw the ball down the field, he has the arm strength to drive it and the accuracy to place footballs kind of over defenders. So I like Bo Nix. I think he's going to be really good value here. Let's move on to our top 30. And this is where JJ McCarthy is. So again, also maybe a guy that I'm probably lower on, I think, than you are. And I like JJ McCarthy. I think the tools are there. You just have to assemble them. And what I mean by that is he has shown at times that he can do all the things you want a quarterback to do. He just doesn't do them all the time. And especially like once you start getting 10 to 15 yards down the field and he has to throw the ball outside the numbers or like throw it over a safety in the middle of the field, that's where I think he really does struggle with just accuracy. I think he has the processing and whatnot. And I think part of it too is he might just not fully believe in himself yet. But all in all, I think the pieces are there. He's a good athlete. He has a good arm. Just a really solid quarterback prospect.
So I'll push back on that. And of course, my example is one throw. But the touchdown pass that he had to Roman Wilson in that Ohio State game was exactly what you're talking about, where it was over the safety, kind of a
Are you talking about the one where like the safety doesn't turn around?
Something like that, but it's still a tight
I'm talking
window.
about like a like deep plays. That was a 25-yard pass over the middle of the field. He ripped it in there. He didn't have to throw it over anybody. Is more what I'm talking about. That's where he struggles.
He threw it over a couple of guys.
Well,
but I get what you're saying, and I guess it's kind of one of the things with the Mr. JJ McCarthy, where if it's like if I'm Denver, for example, and if you are going through a rebuild, I'd rather take my shot on JJ McCarthy, or shoot if you're Minnesota and you don't trade up, and you already got like a quarterback guru in Kevin O'Connell, be like I'll go with JJ McCarthy here over Bo Nix, because I think there's an interesting intrigue with him. And I say that, though, I think Minnesota, in this example, Michael Penix might be a better fit for that style of offense. But that's neither here nor there. So it's going to be – that's what I'm saying. They can go 12th. They can go 50th. Like, I don't know where they're going to end up falling.
My thing is, it's the classic, like, hey, do you want $100 or do you want to spin this wheel where you could win nothing or you could win the lottery? Like, it's –
well, that's the entire what drafted quarter. I mean, go look at Zach
Wilson,
no. Trey Lance.
But you know what you're getting in Bo Nix. Like, you're going to get the consistent game manager who.
Yeah, but inflation's crazy, man. $100 won't get you that far.
Exactly. I'm all for taking the risk on the quarterbacks, but yeah, until it comes to my team, and then they actually have to make the pick at 3, and it's like
in this analogy, and I am notoriously good at picking good football teams to root for, like the Falcons and the Indiana Hoosiers. I'm going to spin the wheel and take my chance.
Yeah, no, I agree.
And so who knows? You're going to come into a situation like if we're sticking with Denver or with, well, it's really Denver, Minnesota now, because the Patriots, if you guys wanted a quarterback, you can get him at number 3. It's those two teams. I would say I would rather take McCarthy or Penix. Well, Penix, I think specifically for Minnesota, just with the style of that offense.
Yeah.
McCarthy, I think, could translate to both. Bo Nix, I think he would do okay. But that's where I think the reason why Penix is a little bit lower, and I'm not realizing this, is just because of how the injury history. I think he's more specific to certain offenses like Minnesota. I think JJ McCarthy is going to be the best option of all of them in both those offenses. While Bo Nix would be like, if we need an Aiden O'Connell-esque, be like, okay, with Bo Nix here,
Yeah. So I think they're very different. If you need a starter right now, maybe Bo Nix is your guy. If you have the time to develop a guy, then I think maybe you go the JJ McCarthy route. So another guy here, Jatavian Sanders from Texas, the very athletic tight end. Didn't really show up at the combine testing, but when you go and turn on the film, he is that athlete that you want him to be, and he does show the willingness to block. And I think a team like Miami, who wants that athletic tight end that can still stay on the field in running situations, I think this is like a perfect fit for them.
Yeah, I'd be curious though with them getting Jonnu Smith. I'd be curious.
That is true.
He's one of the few. That's one of the few teams where I could see him taken in the first round. I could see a team honestly like the Chargers in the early second round going with Jatavian Sanders here. But yeah, in the combine, like he ran a 4.69, which is like I guess technically a little bit slower in the relative to the other tight ends. That being said, though, too, you can make an argument that he's a better blocker than Brock Bowers. You can make an argument that he might even be a little bit of a better No, I won't say pass catcher, but he's very close. Like he's very close. I think the pass catcher. That's why I think not to take away like Jatavian Sanders is a stud. You know,
Oh yeah,
whoever gets him is going to get a top tight end in the league. He's going to be starting day one. So that's why I think a team like the Chargers, I could absolutely see him. I think they would gladly take him at 36 or 37. And so
yeah,
at 28, Tyler Guyton here. This is a guy, just an overall freak athlete. Overall, plug and play, right tackle, boom, like there you go.
yeah.
With
Or honestly, left tackle.
he could do left tackle as well. Yeah,
He's a former tight end. He has the length, athleticism, and size that you want in a left tackle. And right now, I think he's still raw enough. You could probably make that switch fairly seamlessly.
yeah, yeah. So,
So
27, AD Mitchell as well. I was just now thinking about it's like why is AD Mitchell so much higher than Xavier Worthy? And I think it's something similar as well to like obviously Xavier Worthy had the 4.2 140. But I think AD Mitchell's more versatile to an offense. I think he can fit into more types of offenses. He's a little bit more of a polished route runner, more consistent overall in pass catching. A little bit bigger. I think he can play slot. I think he can play outside. I'm thinking of a team like Houston, who man, you just put him with Tank Dell, Nico Collins, like I think he would just be an absolute stud coming in. So great career at Texas. What are your overall thoughts on AD Mitchell?
yeah, just a really solid all around receiver. It's kind of crazy to think about. Like we have hit the point where all of the receivers in last year's class are below the guys that we are starting to talk about, and AD Mitchell does everything I think well. Like there's not one part of his game that I really point to. He uses his size really well in jump ball situations. We saw that against Washington. He usually guys his size at I think 6'3", 6'4", are
6'2", 205.
so, okay, even 6'2", but bigger. So bigger wide receivers sometimes struggle to get off press man, and that's something that I think even he does really well. Is get off man coverage. He has the elusiveness and the speed to beat defensive backs off the line. Like just anything that you want a receiver to do, he can do it,
He
and
does.
that's why he's that much higher above Xavier Worthy.
Yeah, he does need to get a little bit quicker. He only ran a 4.34 40 at 205
Yeah,
pounds. So, I mean, that might be a knock on him. I'm obviously joking if you're typing this. So, let's wrap up this section here of these five players. Kyler Newman, safety for Minnesota. He has been working his way up the boards. It's funny. One of the kind of the consistent themes of is like the overall value of players, of positions kind of pushes players down. Guy like Tyler Newman, though, I mean, he's really been working his way up the draft boards, had a great combine overall. And so I think he might not be a first round pick, but if we're looking at, he's the best safety in this class.
yeah, for sure. And when you look at what he can do, he really is somewhat scheme averse on defensive side of the defensive side of the ball because he can play single high, he can play a two high. He could honestly even really be a slot corner or play like over a tight end or something if you really need him to. And just a really solid defensive back here because I don't want to pigeonhole him into being a safety per se. So
he probably will be a safety.
No. He is a safety, but like he's going to play in a lot of different coverage situations where he's not going to be a safety all the time per se.
Gotcha. So, I see what you're saying. Yeah. So let's wrap up the final five here of the second to last of the kind of 20 sections that we're doing here with Ladd McConkey, receiver from UGA. I really like this guy just because very similar to like a Ricky Pearsall or Jalen Polk. He's just better than both those guys. His route running capabilities is going to be phenomenal. All 32 teams, I think, would want a guy like this in the receiver room just with how good he is as a route runner, creating his own separation. Any quarterback can just lean on this guy. And I'm even looking to how well CJ Stroud did with Tank Dell. Like, I think Ladd McConkey is even better than Tank Dell. Yeah. And so every quarterback's going to be like, I want this guy. I want this guy. You know, we're going to have our number one receiver. That's great. I want this guy right in the slot. So if I know it's 3rd and 4 and I see the perfect zone for just a quick little 4-yard slant to Ladd McConkey, I'm like, boom, I'm calling that hot route right there. And I think Ladd McConkey is going to be able to do that. He can probably one of the best route runners, I think, in this class.
Yeah, and that to me, like I always joke, I feel like Lad McConkey could get separation in a phone booth. Like he can burn people so quick off the line. We saw it at the Senior Bowl. He was the best route runner at the Senior Bowl. He's probably the best route runner in this class outside of the top three.
Yeah.
And that skill in itself is invaluable. We saw what Cooper Cup was able to do with that ability out in LA. And not to compare Loud McConkey to Cooper Cup because I think they're a little different. But again, just a really, really solid route runner. And then on top of that, he has the high end speed to really separate from guys down the field as well. So
Yeah.
really, really talented guy. Another guy that I like, Graham Barton, can play all 5 positions on the offensive line, which is why I think we have him up this high. He did only play in a few games this year for Duke because he did get hurt, but he can play left tackle, he can play right tackle, anything in between, and he's going to be a really solid player at the next level. I will say most likely going to be a center. So if you're specifically looking for a center, this could definitely be a guy to kind of keep in the back of your mind.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it's one of the things too for a guy that might kick inside. But I think overall talent wise, one of the better offensive linemen in this class. But I think that his overall versatility makes that even more valuable because then if anybody be like, okay, we need a left guard, but put Graham Barton there, or
Yeah,
center as what you talked about. So moving on now, Cooper DeJean, super athletic, was we're very high on him. I think we have talked about it more, kind of come to the realization just a little bit is like it's super athletic, but can that though translate to the NFL? Like he was Iowa University football, and so not really too much else was going on with that team last year. But I think another thing as well with similar to Graham Barton is I think his overall versatility. I think something similar. I think he's like the Tyler Nubin of this quarterback class. It's like he can play outside. He can play inside. He could probably even kick back out to safety just with his overall athleticism, so to say. I
yeah.
don't know if that Tyler Newman comparison makes sense, but kind of what we were just talking about a second ago. But he's going to be a guy, a lot of defensive coordinators, like, we can just move this guy around. Also, too, something very similar as well as we saw with Kyle Hamilton go up against Travis Kelce. He can be that guy where, like, hey,
Yeah.
we're just going to man you up against this stud tight end. And with the way tight ends are trending now, imagine Minnesota drafts Cooper DeJean and be like, hey, you're guarding Sam Laporta. Like, that's your job. You just follow Sam Laporta around the entire time. I can see that being that type of matchup and that type of role that Cooper DeJean brings to a defense.
No, yeah, exactly. And that's why I'm so high on him. You look at his athletic pedigree, like what he did in high school and college, and just all of the state championships and college awards that he received. Like, uh, probably the most accomplished athlete in this class already.
Yeah.
And his versatility is something to be said. Buffalo Bills, if he's there at 28, you guys better be sprinting to the podium because he can cover up and play in all of the different holes that you guys have on that defense side of the ball. So
They can cover up Travis Kelce.
yeah, exactly. So next up on the list, Jersey Newton. This is a guy I felt Illinois was kind of playing out of position for most of the year. I think he's going to be a true defensive tackle in kind of a 4-3 scheme. But when he's there and he's healthy, great against the run. He can definitely generate interior pass rush. Just a really solid defensive tackle. Not going to get moved around a lot, and has really good hands. Just a lot of really solid traits here to kind of be in the back end of this first round.
I was thinking about it earlier before we recorded, where it's like if this draft was 3 months ago, I think Jersey Newton on everybody's final mock draft would have been a top 10 pick, just with how great of a defense tackle are they. Like, he's a great player. I think he's an example of how great this defensive class is. But people have been able to see over time, just able to break down guys like Byron Murphy or some of these other guys like Jackson Powers Johnson, which has like moved them up in front of Jersey Newton, just because I think maybe Jersey Newton didn't have as great of a final year, but also too, Illinois was significantly less talented than they were the year before. So
Yeah.
I think whoever's going to get him here in the first round, whether it be in the teens, whether it be in the early or late 20s, is going to get a phenomenal defensive tackle It's a lot of times we were mocking Jersey Newton, or now also Byron Murphy, going to the Las Vegas Raiders, and I still think that potentially could happen with a team like that who has a great defensive interior already, and then you just go and get this young guy and be like, hey, let's give him a couple more years to develop, get a little bit more NFL strength, and then boom, we're set. So let's wrap up the 20s here, and with Jackson Powers Johnson, the guy who's probably risen the most, I would say, up any draft board from the end of the college football season to now. Senior Bowl, I think, was obviously massive for him, and then he proved it again, I think, for the second time within the combine, that he's the top interior offensive lineman. Absolutely could see him going to a team like Seattle at 16. Could see him going to Pittsburgh at 20. Teams that need a center, shoot. Philadelphia. I mean, I know Jason Kelsey moved on. You guys, I'm sure there's already a bunch of backup plans already that have been set in
Jurgens is there.
Cam
but,
Jurgens.
I mean,
yeah,
he was playing guard, I believe, and now he could just stay there if you get JPJ.
Potentially so. It just very seamless. And so we'll have to go and see, but he's going to be a great center, kind of that Tyler Linderbaum of this class, I would say. So
yeah, for sure.
That's going to wrap it up here for the 40 to 21s. If you're still with us here, this episode is going to be full on. We're going to the full 2 hours, top 100. Be sure to like, subscribe, and also ring the bell if you're still with us.